Is it really true that the more training volume you do, the greater the muscle gain? Volume refers to the total workload you perform for a muscle, which includes the product of sets, reps, and weight. For example, if you do 3 sets of 10 reps of barbell bench press with 100 kilograms, your training volume is 3,000 kilograms. Some people believe that the larger the volume, the better the muscle gain. For instance, a 2014 study from the US explored the effect of training with equal volumes of different weights on muscle hypertrophy. They had 17 men with at least 1 year of training experience perform the exercises described above. The first group was the strength group, performing 7 sets with a weight they could only do for 3 reps, while the second group was the hypertrophy group, performing 3 sets with a weight they could do for 10 reps. The strength group did more sets to equalize the volume between the 2 groups. Both groups aimed for progressive overload. The test lasted 8 weeks, with both groups having similar total volumes per session, and the results showed similar biceps growth in both groups. This study suggests that increasing volume may enhance muscle hypertrophy. Another example comes from a study on interset rest periods. 13 men with at least 6 months of training experience performed the exercises described above, doing 3 sets of 8 to 12 reps for each exercise, training 3 times a week for 8 weeks. The goal was also to progressively overload during training. However, the 2 groups had different rest durations between sets. The first group rested 3 minutes between sets, while the second group rested only 1 minute. In this case, the group with longer rest periods could train with heavier weights, so their volume was certainly higher than the short rest group. At the end of the study, the long rest group's biceps, triceps, quadriceps, and vastus lateralis muscle growth were greater. Therefore, from these 2 examples, it can be seen that increasing volume might lead to more muscle hypertrophy. However, many other studies suggest that volume is not necessarily related to muscle hypertrophy. For example, one study had 21 untrained men perform leg press and seated leg 3 sets per exercise 3 times a week for 10 weeks. The first group used a small weight 30% of 1 RM for 12 reps to failure, while the other group used a heavy weight 80% of 1 RM for 12 reps to failure. The low weight group certainly had a higher volume each time, but the results showed similar growth in the slow twitch and fast twitch fibers of the vastus lateralis. Therefore, from the perspective of weight selection, higher volume does not necessarily produce more muscle hypertrophy. Another study involved a group of men with at least 2.5 to 9 years of training experience repeating the exercises described above. They did 3 sets per exercise, 3 times a week for 8 weeks. The first group was the high rep group, doing 25 to 35 reps per set, while the other group was the moderate rep group, doing 8 to 12 reps per set. Both groups aimed to progressively increase the weight each week. By the last week of the study, the high rep group had increased their training volume by 3,135 kilograms compared to the first week, while the moderate rep group had only increased by 1,704 kilograms. However, the results again showed similar muscle growth in both groups. This study indicates that increasing training volume over time does not necessarily lead to more muscle growth. Another study on training to failure also does not support volume as a factor in muscle hypertrophy. It involved men with an average of 5 years of training experience performing unilateral leg press and unilateral leg extensions using 75% of 12 RM twice a week for 10 weeks. The subjects trained one leg to failure, while the other leg stopped 1 to 3 reps short of failure. The leg trained to failure performed a greater total volume over the 10 weeks. However, both legs showed similar growth in the vastus lateralis, once again demonstrating that more volume does not necessarily lead to more muscle hypertrophy. In conclusion, although there is some evidence supporting that increasing volume can lead to more muscle hypertrophy, there are also studies with contrary findings. As seen from previous videos on daily set numbers, volume should be relative, and there may be an upper limit beyond which additional volume does not lead to more muscle growth. Our bodies may not be able to handle such high training volumes. A person who can bench press 200 kilograms for sets will still be able to push many sets of 20 kilograms even when tired. But does this volume really help with muscle growth? For natural fitness enthusiasts, sometimes we need to learn to let go. Let go of those training volumes that do not help with muscle growth, but extend our recovery time. Perseverance is correct, but don't just endure hardship blindly. Training properly and exhausting your muscles are two different concepts. Many people think that only by completely exhausting their muscles to the point where daily life becomes difficult, they have trained adequately. This is actually a misconception. Former heavyweight bodybuilding champion McMahon advocated doing only one set per workout, training to failure with high intensity. He believed that our bodies can only handle a limited amount of training volume. Of course, various studies now show that doing 3 to 5 sets per workout is better for muscle growth than doing just one set. While others are still debating whether to do one set or multiple sets, some have already evolved to doing 30 to 40 sets for a single muscle group in one session. Some people even perform 5 or 6 different exercises for the chest, starting with 100 kilograms bench presses until they can't lift anything anymore, thinking that this is sufficient training. However, according to the latest scientific research, the initial few sets you do for a muscle provide the most benefit. As you perform more sets, the gains you achieve diminish, eventually reaching a threshold. If you continue to increase the number of sets beyond this point, you might even start to lose muscle. One study from 2002 involved subjects performing one set of bench press and one set of leg press 3 times a week for 12 weeks. Despite the extremely low training volume, just 3 sets per muscle per week, they still managed to build some muscle. Then the researchers used a different approach. They had the subjects perform 27 sets of quadriceps training per week for 4 months. They measured the muscle growth and then divided the subjects into 3 groups. The first group reduced their training volume to 9 sets per week. The second group reduced it to 3 sets per week. And the last group stopped training altogether. 8 months later, the group that stopped training returned to their baseline muscle mass. The group doing 3 sets per week maintained their muscle mass, and the group doing 9 sets per week gained additional muscle. Another study led by B-Cell conducted a meta-analysis comparing weekly training volumes of 1 to 5 sets, 5 to 9 sets, and more than 10 sets per muscle group. They found that performing more than 10 sets per muscle per week resulted in the greatest growth. Interestingly, performing 1 to 5 sets per week still provided about 60% of the muscle growth compared to doing more than 10 sets. Therefore, based on current research, doing just 3 sets per muscle per week is enough to maintain your existing muscle mass and might even lead to slight gains. Performing 4 to 7 sets per muscle per week might be the optimal point for maximizing gains with minimal time and effort. If you have more time and energy, you can still aim for 10 to 20 sets per muscle per week. But it's best to spread these sets over 2 to 3 days. It is recommended to start with the minimum amount of training volume and gradually increase it to find what works best for you. For example, if you follow a split training routine with 3 days on and 1 day off, and when you return to training, your target muscles are not affected by soreness, and you feel an increase in weight or reps, even just 1 extra rep, then that volume suits you. If your muscles are still sore and your strength has decreased, it means your previous volume was too much. If there is no soreness and no strength gain, you can slightly increase your training volume by adding 2 or 3 sets. Finally, regarding training volume, everyone should refer to the studies and adjust based on personal experience.